Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Muy buenos días. Voy a empezar en español y luego cambiar a inglés para la discusión. Bueno, como es tiempo de recordar, yo recordaba cuando inicié en esto de la salud pública, estaba en un programa de salud rural en México y uno de esos días de tardes después de la tormenta, donde uno tiene tiempo de sentarse con los directores a conversar, estaba con uno de ellos y me dice: mira, Diego, cambiar a estas instituciones es como empujar a un elefante blanco. Uno empuja, empuja, empuja y cuando cree que ya se movió, suelta, la piel se mueve y regresa donde estaba. Y entonces, en esas primeras visitas de campo, cuando llegamos con la iniciativa, entramos a los hospitales y la sala de espera estaba llena. El triage lo hacía el vigilante, que veía a la señora: no, usted pásele acá, usted vaya hacia urgencias. Entramos al hospital y todo el mundo corría para todos lados, pero no parecía claro que la gente supiera qué estaba haciendo. Fuimos a un centro de salud y le preguntamos al doctor: doctor, ¿y quién le toma los signos vitales a la mujer? La enfermera. Y entonces fuimos con la enfermera: oiga, enfermera, ¿y usted qué hace? Ah, no, pues a todas las que vienen aquí, todas mis pacientitas, yo las tallo y las peso. ¿Y los signos vitales? Eso lo hace el médico. Fuimos a la farmacia. ¿Y ustedes cómo estiman sus necesidades? ¿Cómo piden sus medicamentos? Con base a consumo. Ajá. ¿Y qué pasa cuando se les acaban? Y entonces, ¿qué pasa con esos días? ¿Cómo los toman en cuenta? Ah. Entonces, yo dije: Emma, tenemos enfrente un elefante blanco. Y bueno, ustedes conocen el final de la historia. La realidad es que no hay que empujar a los elefantes blancos porque tienen pies. Entonces, esto nos lleva a lo que vamos a discutir el día de hoy, que es cómo mejorar el desempeño de los sistemas de salud para mejorar la calidad de la atención. Cómo lograr que ese médico y esa enfermera hablen para ponerse de acuerdo y que sepan quién va a tomar los signos vitales. Cómo lograr que la proyección de necesidades considere también los periodos donde no hay medicamentos. Cómo lograr que el que hace el triage en el hospital no sea el vigilante, sino que sea alguien que conoce de los factores de riesgos y que sepa identificar a una urgencia de una persona que viene a una consulta normal. La mejora de la calidad no son grandes inversiones en tecnología, no es exclusiva a los grandes hospitales de especialidad y puede suceder en todos lados. Entonces hoy vamos a hablar de cómo hacer estas cosas y, claro, otras mucho más complejas, no en una unidad de salud, sino en todo el sistema de salud. Entonces ahora sí voy a pasar a inglés para presentar a quien nos va a hacer una presentación el día de hoy. It is my honor to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Rashad Massoud. He has worked in over 100 countries and understands the challenges faced across different healthcare settings, from well-funded private hospitals to resource-limited facilities in remote areas. And above all, Rashad is one of the most insightful, forward-thinking leaders in healthcare quality today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Rashad Massoud.
Thank you, Diego. This was a beautiful and very generous welcome. Good morning, everybody. It's a real honor to be with you here today. I want to thank the IDB and the partners, in particular Emma, for engaging me in this amazing journey over the past more than 10 years now. I remember at the beginning, I remember points in time, and of course, to be here at the moment that we're celebrating this huge success is just amazing. Yesterday, we heard so much about the accomplishments, about the results, and I won't go over them again, but I do want to reflect on how some of these were achieved for the purpose of thinking about where we go from here, which is what I was asked to talk about. Now, I have to admit right off, I am not a magician. I don't have a crystal ball. And also, I think we heard something really important yesterday. And what we heard yesterday is that all of these solutions are contextual. Different countries are at different places, and so there is no formula. There's no recipe for this. In order to do that, what I thought about is maybe I can pose some questions and with you reflect on those questions as to how we can go forward. So with that in mind, I'd like to start us off. And the first thing I'd like to do is actually and get us to a place where we think about how can we get whole systems to perform with high quality. Now, to start us off, what I'd like to do is to tell you a story. Now, the story that I'd like to tell is a true story, and the person who led the work is with us in the room, my colleague and friend, Jorge Hermida. So I'll tell the story, and of course, if you have any difficult questions afterwards, you know who to ask. Is that okay, Jorge? The story starts like this, and this is more than 20 years ago. A woman had bleeding caused by a retained placenta in the postpartum period. She was admitted to a health center. She had been delivered by a traditional birth attendant in her village. Now, that birth attendant was trained to recognize that if the placenta was not delivered within 30 minutes after the baby was born, there was a danger of hemorrhage. And, therefore, the birth attendant basically asked the family to get the woman to the hospital. Her brother, the woman's brother, went out, flagged the car on the street, went to the health center, and basically told them the story. He reported the problem. They sent him back in an ambulance to fetch her. On arrival, the team at the health center was ready. They basically inserted an IV, they started an oxytocin trip, they conducted manual removal of the placenta under anesthesia within minutes of her arrival. Half an hour later, and only 2 hours after the baby's birth, the mother was in her bed, resting, nursing her infant. Now you can imagine this story could have ended up in a very different way had it not been for this alignment of things that had to come together in order to save the woman and of course yield that outcome. Recognition of danger, the decision to evacuate from the village to the health center, transportation, reception at the health center, mobilization of emergency care once they knew that this was happening, correct technical care, good interpersonal communication and concern, good results and follow-up. These are all the signs of high-quality care. And it happened in this particular case along the whole continuum of care. What it is essentially is doing the right thing at the right time, and of course, the devil is in the detail. I'd like to use that example to articulate a definition of quality care. Quality care is what happens at all points of service along the continuum of care. And high quality care is a function of the system's ability to produce care that will address the client's needs and issues in an effective, responsive, and respectful manner. The views of the clients are critical, not only because of the notion of patients' rights, but also because efficacy of medical interventions depends on people seeking care, feeling reassured after the visit, and the provider adhering to the treatment and to the recommendations. I was in our office at URC when this story was told by Dave Nicholas, and once he started to say this definition, I wrote it down right away. I have been using it since then. And of course, Dave is my predecessor. He's also a dear colleague and friend for Jorge, for Emma, many of you here in the room, as well as myself. And I like to pay tribute to the good work that he has done and for his contribution to healthcare improvement globally. Yesterday, my mentor, the person who taught me improvement, Don Berwick, talked a lot about the key things that are in improvement. And I don't want to repeat some of what he said, but I would like to build on some of what he said yesterday and create some reflections on what it takes to do this. This is an adaptation of Paul Batalden's original model for how all of the good care is about. There's the medicine that we know, the evidence-based interventions that are critical. Without them, we can't improve care. But then these need to be organized in ways that allow us to make that care happen for every patient every time that it's needed. And the organization of care delivery, who does what at what point in time, how do I hand over to each other, is critical. And so at the heart of improving care is taking the good medicine that we know, combining it with the systems knowledge, the process knowledge that we have in order to deliver great care. And this is not a technique thing, it's more of a culture. And it really is an important way to think about not only how we've accomplished the results, but how we can continue to achieve results like these going forward. These are some of the principles that, of course, have been articulated. I won't, again, in the interest of time, I want to just mention something about testing and measuring changes and how much yesterday I heard about the iterative, contextual adaptation of the different changes that is critical to the results that we achieve. And also about the shared learning aspect. And, as Fernando Regalia yesterday said, what worked and what did not work and why didn't it work and how we learn from all of this, putting it all together. And of course, the model for improvement, which again, Don covered yesterday. I want to talk about an idea that's evolved in the last few years by a couple of our colleagues, Peter Lackman and Chris Van Hecht, working with Paul Batalden. And it's the idea of co-production of health. If you haven't read the paper, please do. It's an amazing read, and it really, we've always talked about being focused on the patients, meeting patients' needs and expectations. And they've really taken it to another level where they're talking about not just understanding the systems, but co-producing health together with the patient. That is, the patient is in the driver's seat, the family is with them. What we are trying to do here is support them in achieving the health that they need. Again, a very important topic that I like to bring to our attention as we go forward in doing this. Again, in the last few years, we've had the results of the Lancet Commission on quality, high-performing quality systems. And again, here's another one where I go back and I read this and I look at, what did we know? Way back, Avidas Donabedian talked about the model, the systems model, and he talked about the inputs. Well, if you think about the foundations that are mentioned in the Lancet Commission, the needs of the people, the governance aspects, the policies, the insurance, the non-healthcare actors that are part of all of this, the platforms for service delivery and organization of the care delivery mechanisms, the workforce, the tools, equipment, medicine, supplies, all of that are the inputs that Donna Bedian talked about. We, of course, have the processes. And the most important part of this is the impact. The reason why we worry about the inputs and we worry about the processes and we redesign care processes is in order to achieve the outcomes, the impact that we want from this. And I would go even further and say, to me, it's not just about outcomes, it's also about value. Value defined as what quality do we achieve at what cost? And so to us, these are the types of ideas that we need as we go forward in continuing to improve care. Now I'm going to pose a few questions. The first question I'm posing is access sufficient? We've heard about the experiences yesterday. The Mesoamerica initiative was talking not only about access, but quality care. And as Margaret Chan said it, what good does it do to offer free maternal care if a high proportion of babies are delivered in facilities where the quality is substandard or even dangerous? We've had that experience in real life, and I think it's really important for us to be not only thinking about increasing access to care, but increasing access to quality care, care that actually saves lives and alleviates suffering. The next one comes from work that I did with colleagues of mine for the PEPFAR quality strategy. We were really trying to wrap our heads around the standards-based approaches, that is, here's what we should do versus here's where we go next. And we actually came up with this diagram that basically talks about, yes, we do need to set standards, we need to achieve these standards, but we cannot be satisfied with achieving standards. We have to be thinking about how do we move the standards forward and what else can we do in order to achieve even better standards. And as we do that, we actually can raise the standards themselves, which became a way of thinking about standards-based approaches, the quality assurance types of activities versus the improvement activities and how we link the two together. Our industry, healthcare, is what I call data-rich, information poor. And we have a problem. We have so much data that we just don't convert into valuable information. And yesterday, I think Alicia Menendez articulated it so beautifully in the NORC evaluation. It was very clear how you take data and how you convert it and how it becomes meaningful. And it's not only meaningful because it's quantitative, it's the combination of the quantitative and qualitative aspects, the stories that go alongside that make it come to life and allow us to truly understand what works, what doesn't work, and why it worked and how it worked. The other question I want to pose is improving processes sufficient? I'm reminded by one of the old paradigms that I learned about early on, that to improve care, we need a combination of culture, strategy, and technique. It's the combination of the three of them. So much of the conversation happens about the technique, which, of course, I'm an improver. That's what I do. But I say technique on its own doesn't do it. We also need to have the right strategy. Are we focusing on the right things? Are we doing what we should be doing? Is this going to be significant to the system? Is the leadership on board? Do we have people with us? Also, the culture. All of this, if not embedded in a culture that is conducive to allowing it to happen and allowing it to continue to evolve, it just doesn't work in the same way. Yesterday, I heard our colleague, Heidi Morales from El Salvador. And literally, I mean, you were describing it, and I was thinking, there's no better way to think about the culture than the way you articulated it. Thank you so much. I loved it. The other question on my mind is, can we actually dictate improvement? Can we make people improve care? And of course, the answer is no. Unless we have people's, not only minds, we have to appeal to people's intellect, but we also have to have their hearts in it. This is a heart and mind issue. And to the extent that we do that, then yes, our health workforce will be engaged and they will improve quality of care. I want to talk about a few learnings that evolved from quality of care and how these feed into some of the future directions that we have. The first thing is differentiating between methods for measuring quality and for improving quality. I can talk about this at length, but there's one thing that I remember. In my home country, Palestine, in the villages, we have a saying. And the saying goes as follows. The villagers say, you cannot fatten your cow by measuring it every day. That's not how your cow gets fatter. If you want your cow to get fatter, you actually have to feed it. You have to do something different. Yes, you won't know that it got fatter unless you measure it, but the act of measurement does not yield improvement in its own right. And I think that sort of sums it up in one sentence. The second thing is differentiating between standards-based approaches, all the accreditation and certification, everything, all of which is really important. I don't want to undermine it, but that is not in itself an improvement activity. That tells you that you've achieved the standards. But then if you go back to the model that we developed with PEPFAR at the time, there is a way to link standards-based approaches and improvement approaches and let them reinforce each other and go forward. We have a lot of methodology and terminology confusion. My God, you might have noticed I avoid at length trying to talk about any sort of method or model. It's unbelievable, and I can tell you stories about this. I've been on a mission for many years now trying to say, please, eliminate the jargon. Let's just make it simple, make everybody be able to do it. We won't improve healthcare unless everybody can improve healthcare. So we have to get rid of this. We have learned a lot about how to take things to scale, and that's really important. However, there is still a lot that we need to learn about how to take things that work to scale. And this is something that is in evolution. Actually, on March 6th, I'm presenting at the Escuela, the International Society for Quality in Healthcare, the African Community of Practice on this. Please join us. I'm happy to send you the link. And it's a really important topic, and it's a topic that we need to continue to evolve and to learn. The only way we're going to learn about it is by actually doing it and studying what we do and having people like Norg literally teach us what we can learn from what we are doing and scaling up. There's a term that's called institutionalization, and that is creating the capability within the organization to continually improve. And I have to say, when I think about the unfinished agenda, this is a big one. In the unfinished agenda on improving healthcare, it's how do we create that internal capability to continually improve? And I think this is a nut that we yet have to crack. We have islands of excellence. In some places it works. But why it works and how can we make it work everywhere is still something that I believe we need to learn about. The integration of health equity as a key component, which I think has been very well addressed in the Mesoamerica initiative. Unfortunately, it is not being addressed in healthcare improvement worldwide. And I think we have methods, we've got ways, and there are some publications that show that we can do that, but I think that's another thing that we need to continue to emphasize going into the future. Yesterday, I was delighted to hear Sebastian Bohoff and Wolfgang talk about how we learn in complex adaptive systems. And again, Emma, if I haven't sent it to you already, because I remember a conversation about this, I would love to send you the results or the publications from the Salzburg Global Seminar on how do we learn about improvement in complex adaptive systems. Please share them widely. They're in the public domain. This is an area that I think is really important for us to look at carefully, and the types of methods, which of course yesterday Nork was very good at articulating, but I think it puts a foundation for us on how to do that. Continuing to collaborate, share learnings, and managing the knowledge related to improvement, it is a critical one. And last but not least, simplicity. Simplicity is key. And talking of simplicity, let me share something with you. Can you see what I'm seeing? This is a time series chart. This time series chart comes from Ethiopia. My colleague and friend, Jorge's friend, Ram Shrestha, who worked with us for many years, was trying to explain the progress of the team. And you can see this is a concrete thing. He just drew on the concrete, and he drew you know, when there's a will, there's a way. And I got this picture, and I thought, this is something that I'm so proud of. It just puts it right there. Let's not make it complicated. Let's make it as simple as it can be, and it can be done everywhere with all sorts of ways. I'm looking at the time, and I think I might not be able to go over this. I had expressed this earlier that we might not have enough time, but this will be in the slides. You can read it, and it sort of really compares the sort of traditional culture versus a culture of improvement going forward. So I won't try to go through it here, but I do want to talk about this one and use the last few minutes for it. These two pictures come from somebody by the name of Sonia Sparkles. I don't know her, but she's on Twitter, and she sends these amazing images. She must be linked to the community of improvers, because she does quite a bit on this. What I love about this is that she really tries to differentiate between what she thought improvement was, which was for the elite, for those who can, you know, who know the statistical methods and everything. And yes, of course, they're very important, and, you know, we've all learned them and we teach them. But this is not what improvement is. Improvement is about making everybody be able to improve. And with that, I want to ask you, I want to end on this. It's a final thought that I'd like. This is a question for you now. Can somebody just raise your hand if you've ever seen a toddler see a candle being lit for the first time in their life? Put your hand up. Have you seen that? You have. Okay. Let me ask you a question. When that toddler sees a candle being lit for the first time in their lives, what do they do? Please, could you tell me? What do they do? They try to touch it. Beautiful. What happens when they try to touch it?
The mother yells.
Okay, and what does the baby do? Let's say the mother didn't yell. They get burnt. So what do? They pull their hand back. Now, here's the real question. What has that toddler just done? They ran a PDSA cycle. Think of it this way. That toddler, who can't even speak yet, just ran a PDSA cycle in their mind. Oh my God, it looks good. It must feel great. I'm going to touch it. All of a sudden, it looks good, but it does not feel great. It feels bad. So next time, what do? I look at it. I enjoy watching it. I don't touch it because it hurts when I touch it. The reason I like this, and I want to end on this, is because I want to say that improvement is simple. And whether we like it or not, every one of us is born an improver. We run PDSA cycles every day of our lives, multiple times a day. Think about it. That is what we're doing day in, day out. And I hope that with this, I'm trying to make it that improvement is everybody's job, and we all know how to do it. Whether we use complicated, sophisticated techniques or very simple techniques, every newborn does it every time. Thank you. You're good. Thank you very much.
He forgot to say, don't try this at home. Please take a seat. So now we're going to dive deeper in the topics that Rashad just raised and explore the questions that matter most to you. But before we begin, let me introduce our panelists that will be joining Rashad. Remember throughout this presentation that you have the QR codes for the Menti. You can start writing questions at any point, and we'll get into that. So first, let me introduce Jafet Arrieta. She has focused in large-scale quality improvement and health system strengthening efforts across the globe. And she brings deep expertise and hands-on experience in Latin America. So welcome, Jafet. And next, my colleague, Pedro Bernal. He led the impact evaluation of the Salud Mesoamerica initiative and is one of the leaders of the quality agenda for the health division of the bank. Welcome, Pedro. So Rashad just shared some very powerful insights on quality improvement. This was maybe a masterclass on quality improvement. So you guys are in a top spot. He talked about improvement knowledge, the co-production of health, building together with the patient. Access is not access if there's no quality. Learning how to scale. So, Jafet, what are your reactions to what Rashad just presented? What would you add?
That's a very easy question. I fully agree with what he said. So hi, everyone. Wonderful to be here with all of you. It's an honor and a pleasure and a privilege. And thank you, Emma, for the invitation and for the leadership. This is just humbling to see. Today, I want to speak as an improvement expert, but also as a woman and as a mother who, during pregnancy, having access to many resources, faced many challenges. And I want to bring that lens back because it gets to the question that you were asking and to what Rashad was saying. This is not just about the technical piece. This is not just about knowing what to do, what interventions work, are evidence-based. It's about closing the no-do gap that Emma was talking about yesterday. It's about creating the enabling environment. It's about building the capacity, the capability, so that those people, all of us, and all of the people that you all work with back home can do what they want to do without just having to try harder. It's about that. It's about bringing those pieces together. Because I think, and what Rashad didn't mention explicitly, is that we work in complex systems and on complex issues. Not just maternal health, neonatal health, think about chronic conditions. We work in complex systems and on complex issues, and that demands complex interventions at multiple levels. And I'm actually going to go back to your analogy. I didn't know you were going to talk about elephants. But I'm going to go back to your analogy just to explain. At the end of the day, we're trying to encourage, motivate behavior change to produce lasting impact at scale. How do we do that? There is a lot of literature out there. And actually, I think yesterday someone cited Switch, the book. So there are 3 ways. Direct the writer, that's behavioral economics, right? Share the knowledge, tell them what to do. The second way is motivate the elephant. That goes back to psychology of change and the human side of change. How do we, again, motivate, tap into incentives, into intrinsic and extrinsic motivation? And then the last one, and I think that's one of the beauties of Salud Mesoamerica, is shape the path. Create the conditions for change to happen and the elephant to move and know which way to follow. I'm going to stop there. Maybe that was more than you expected, but hard to follow, Rashad, as you said.
Thank you, Jafet. Pedro.
Thank you very much. I feel very honored to be here with you, and frankly, also a bit intimidated. I'm an economist, and I'm not an expert on quality improvement. But what I'm going to share more is more like what I've seen in the initiative, like as successes, as challenges, and also as questions that we haven't answered, and we're trying to, on how to build quality into the whole health systems. But the point that I would like to start with, and something that I got from your talk, and I love it, is this idea that quality improvement can be done like everywhere. And I love that picture that you showed there. And I take that because in the experience in working with all the health teams in the countries that I have been privileged to go and to travel with, I've seen a lot of the vast majority of people that work there are people that are doing their best, are people that are putting their effort. And if you provide just like a bit of tools, a bit of inspiring, a bit of listening, a bit of like take them out of this community that is like 5 hours away, bring them together with some colleagues to chat, to see the problems. That's really powerful. And for them, this investment, say, on listening, on bringing it together, that goes a long way. And it builds like this energy. Yesterday, they were saying this mystique, like in the organization, that is really hard to replicate. But all this time to listen and learn from them and giving them the space, and even like just some basic tools, I think that's something that's really powerful. And we need to think more intentionally on how to do that more, how to make sure that we reach them, that we listen to them, and that we provide them the tools that they need to do their work. So I'll start with that.
Thank you, Pedro. This is fantastic. I think we have a lot of people here from Ministries of Health. So one of the questions is, how can you build these improvement systems into health systems? How can you do that in practice? Perhaps, Rashad, you can give us some insights on that.
You know, I love the use of the word mystique because you're really describing the culture. And to me, that is the key point. And in fact, with your permission, I'm going to be using that now. Because there is something about, you know, when you go into a place where this is happening right, you just feel it. It's what Heidi was describing yesterday. You just feel that there's something right about this. Now, how do we create that culture? Again, no, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a magician, but it takes an alignment of stars. It takes that leadership, that basically, you know, one of the things I love about when I started to learn about safety is to understand that, for example, when somebody says it nearly went wrong, or it went wrong with me, and not to hide it, that is the gem that you need. You need that culture of transparency, the non-penalizing culture that allows us to learn and improve on a regular basis. So it is really critical for us to think about what are the key components. And I'm just articulating one or two of them, but there's a lot that goes into creating that type of culture. And again, this is probably one of those areas where we can learn a lot more, just like scale up, institutionalization. How do we create that culture that allows us to continually improve?
Jafet, you know the health systems in Latin America. You know our culture. How can we do this in our region?
That's a really good question. So I think we have seen examples of how it is possible to create change and create sustainable change at scale. And I think I will reflect on 3 points. The first one is discipline and rigor. I think, Rashad, you were talking about the methods, right? And sometimes we create a lot of confusion and we fight against each other, like academicians. We're guilty of that, right? We are like, no, it's this framework or that framework. At the end of the day, I think all frameworks are wrong. Some are helpful. And it's important to make sure that you take what works, not only from the frameworks and the tools, but more importantly, it is to honor the rigor. Don told us yesterday, it's about learning, but it's about learning with rigor. And if we use the model for improvement, right, saying, okay, what's our aim? How will we know that a change is an improvement? How are we going to measure and evaluate it? What changes are we going to make? Because improvement requires change, but not all change is improvement. And then, how do we PDSA it? And one thing that Alicia didn't mention explicitly yesterday, and that I would be curious to learn more about, is the fidelity of the interventions and the fidelity of the methodology. the adoption of the methodology, the doing the PDSAs rigorously, the learning as you go, and building ramps of PDSAs. So I guess my first point is around using a method or methods and honoring the rigor. The second one is around this theory of building on social capital. Social capital is at the forefront of the conversations these days. It's not just about human capital, it's about social capital. And two thoughts come to mind. The importance of building strong ties, connection, relatedness, reciprocity, making sure that it's a two-way street when you engage with governments at the macro level, with governments at the subnational level, and more importantly, when you connect with the providers in the front line and with the people in the communities that we serve. Strong ties, connection, psychology of change, going back to Deming. And the second point related to social capital is creating wide bridges. Wide bridges. Yesterday, you asked me a really good question about learning and how do we enable learning and what's the secret sauce of learning systems? I don't know. And I do believe that if you have some strong ties, but then create the mechanisms to enable wide bridges to allow for the flow of knowledge, learning, and collaboration, I do believe that that leads to collective capacity and collective action. Collective action with constancy of purpose, which is key, and stems from that connection with what matters. Rocio gave us a perfect example yesterday, and then I'm going to pause there. She said, the government wanted to work, Salud Mesoamerica wanted to work on maternal mortality. Maternal mortality, we saw it as a big problem in Costa Rica. And given our knowledge of the context, we knew that we needed to start by focusing on reducing teenage pregnancy. There was a connection that was built, a strong tie around mutual interests and needs, but there were also bridges that were built to allow for adaptation and knowledge transfer and collective action.
Thank you. Pedro, you have not only tried to evaluate this, but tried to make it happen in some of the countries in Central America. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit of how to do this in practice.
I don't know. And I really, like many of the experts of how to do it in practice are here in the audience, particularly in the coordination unit. I have like a great team to do this. What I can reflect is pretty much on what I've seen in this effort. No? I think sometimes in this approach on how to build a health system, we can think of two approaches, no? Like the bottom-up approach and the top-down approach. I think the bottom-up approach is actually easier, kind of. In the bottom-up approach, I mean, say, let's start with doing a quality improvement in a single hospital. So you have a coach or someone that empowers them and teach them how to do it and see the benefit and all that. And that can happen at a small scale. And some of them actually get like really excited about it and get to it and start like running with all these tools. And that happens at that scale. And you can do that in a few other hospitals as well. So that's the bottom up, several hospitals doing the same thing. But the challenge there is that they suddenly start seeing things that are system-based, not just like hospital-based, that they're not able to change. And they don't have anyone pretty much like to talk to or to try to address these issues. So you need something up for them, like to actually, this team 42 that Berwick was talking, like this team at the health system that actually listens to them and help them to put things together. And that is actually like a bit absent, I've seen like in many ministries. And you're trying to build this, say, from the top down. I guess there's also like two approaches. You can think about something that is someone at the top says, we're going to build quality improvement, and that's the aim. And it can seem like imposed, I guess. That's the challenge. Or you can try to build some appropriation and building like little by little. And I think like the initiative is a good example of that. It takes a lot of time to bring people together, discussing what are we going to do, what are the aims that are going to do it. Let's try to build it together. And that actually starts changing changing more like the culture, and that in turn affects the systems. I think, and it's something that I'm going to pose as a question, is the question that I was asking to Jafet and I still have an answer. I think it's really hard, is what's the right structure that we need to build at this level, at the higher levels in the ministry? Or maybe it's not a structure, no. What do we need to build at the high levels of the ministry to actually empower all these people that are doing improvement, like at the lowest levels? And that's pretty much like an open question and something that
I think you're ready to answer. Go ahead.
That's a fantastic question you just posed, and I'm looking at Natalia Largispada here because we just went through that, and I have to say that it does take that energy, and I was just absolutely delighted to see the reception at the Ministry of Health of Belize and how they took that on and how they've moved ahead with it. So I think it's really important to create the infrastructure, but that infrastructure needs to have the right people with the right mindset, with the right attitude and the right capabilities that would stimulate improvement throughout the country. And to me, that's one of the examples I'm talking about all the time now, because to see it happen is amazing.
And now let's think about this issue of bringing quality improvement throughout the system and not just a few facilities. Jafet, how can you do that? Please, let's do...
Yeah. So I think it's important to use a holistic approach. One of the frameworks that in my mind has been missing from some of the conversations that we've had yesterday and today is Durant's trilogy, and the importance of thinking about not just quality improvement, but quality management systems, and bringing back together quality planning, which happens a lot across ministries at the national and subnational level, then quality improvement, which builds on the understanding of the current state and the gaps in the bringing that knowledge, but also quality control. And quality control, I think, historically across Latin America, based on my experience, has been misunderstood as certifications and accreditation. Quality control goes beyond that. And to me, that's the key for sustainability and institutionalization. And it's something that you need to design for from the beginning. Quality control is something that you need to start as you start testing and demonstrating what works, of course, adapted to the local context. How do you then systematize and standardize, right, so that that becomes a part of the routine of operations, so that people can move from an improvement to an operational mindset? This is no longer just a new QI project. It's the way we do things around here, and that's culture. And so I think, and just to summarize, that seeing quality as the strategy, not a strategy, and not just focusing on QI, but quality management systems. One thing that Emma didn't say yesterday, but that I think was a tacit objective of the initiative, was building and strengthening the culture of quality within the ministries and within the facilities that benefited from the intervention. And by listening to Perla, I can see that that happened. Alicia's presentation was beautiful and amazing. What really sold me on the fact that the initiative succeeded was listening to Perla, because that demonstrates culture change, and that stays, that transforms people at the individual level, at the collective level, and also at the system level.
Fantastic. Pedro, you worked a lot with mid-level managers and trying to implement culture change. You just said that it's hard for them to work up to a point because sometimes leadership needs to come in and change things. So what else would you add?
So I guess like 2 points. One is that we often talk about health systems, but they're actually not designed as systems. They're actually designed as a collection of silos, no? Like in the they're like procurement, and there's the percent of primary care, and there's hospital care. And they're actually not connected to each other. And that's how most ministries are actually like organized. And I think from moving from a collection of silos into a system, there needs to be some connection between all of these. I think I would say there are like 4 things that we can think of how to bring them together. 2, we have talked about like plenty here, like having a clear aim on some result, having some leadership to bring them together, that's for sure. But I will add like 2 more that I think that are also like very powerful. One is like having this spaces for collaboration and learning between them. But it's developing the space with the aim, the issue they're trying to solve, bring them all together to see how we can solve this issue that is not just the issue of primary care or hospital care, but it's the issue of the system. And also with that, I would say, I really don't know how to build it, but have like this shared accountability of the result. Because essentially, if we are buying into what we want is to reduce maternal mortality, and that's what we are putting our skin on the game for, then that accountability actually moves people together, because we quickly realize that you're on your own, you're not going to make it. So you need the others, and you need to start working to the aim. So that's something that I will add. And just, if you allow me, I would just mention like one more thing, because you mentioned like the coaching program. And so that's something like at the system level. But I think that often when we talk about leadership, we usually think about the leaders that are already like formed. We look for the champion. No? We're going to work here if we find the champion that can help us do it. So we find the leader that has the right skill set for us like to succeed. But I think we often don't see how can we form those leaders and what tools can we give them. And at least in the coaching program, what I realized, like these middle managers that are like head of a primary care network, a supervisor that supervises 3 or 4 units, if you provide them some skills of leadership, they're actually like very empowered with them. In some of the first iterations that we have with this, even like it was just like a validation of the program that we went to Honduras, and they started teaching like how do you give feedback to someone, like that you listen, and then you say, oh, I observed this, and then you provide like some way of improving, but without pointing at the person or anything. And some of them say like, no, nobody had taught me this like ever. How come like this? And when they start like practicing and seeing the results, it's like this is something that we need to actually try to help them learn and improve and give them the tools to form leaders, not just to find the leaders, but give them the tool to create them.
Thank you, Pedro. We have 2 minutes. Let's talk a little bit about sustainability. How can you make these changes last? Rashad.
Embedding this into the everyday work of the health workers, the practitioners, engaging them in a way that makes this become the routine, so that this doesn't change with time. Also, onboarding new people. I heard a lot about turnover, making sure that when people come in, they're onboarded, and we're keeping this alive. Those are critical things. Now, that's just on the practical level. There is a strategy involved here, which is how do you actually make this? So hardwiring it into the system, creating the policies and the regulations that make it happen, and the human resource requirements for that to come together.
Jafet.
I would say 2 things. So intentionality, first. The second one is integration. And that relates to health system strengthening and really focusing on how could we leverage these initiatives that provide vertical funding for one condition to truly strengthen quality across the system, and so that we can create then both the support systems that make change last, but also the adoption mechanisms for change to spread across the system and to get to scale, which is what you mentioned yesterday, Ines. So I think intentionality, integration from the get-go, and integration so that instead of building parallel teams and parallel systems that disappear when the funding goes away, that you really build within the ministry, within the systems at the national and subnational level, and that takes time. And I was so happy to hear Ferdinando's reflection yesterday, because I think that if we are serious about getting to scale in a sustainable way, we need to start thinking about like a 10-year horizon, and of course have a plan for short-term wins and objectives, but think about the long run from the beginning.
Pedro, final thought.
What I've seen often, like in many places, is that this quality improvement, especially if you take it seriously and focus on results, sometimes goes like against the grain of what people are asked to do in the system. Sometimes, for instance, in supervision, no? Supervision is highly focused on compliance, things that you need to do, basic stuff. Probably in some places we've seen like this very big list of compliance that supervisor needs to follow. And if you want to start improving and also doing this, you kind of like lose the energy of it. Like, and you lose the motivation of it. So for me, like the challenge here in sustainability is especially of this energy and the aim for improvement is kind of trying to see how can we align these structures or the current, for instance, take supervision. No? How can we align the supervision structure so that it's actually more, gives a space for them to do improvement and not just a set of compliance on rules that might be important, but might not be the most important, particularly for results. And I think we need to start thinking more about that. How do we build in what systems already do to focus in more to improvement?
Thank you, Pedro. Now we're going to take a couple questions from the audience. So if you want to participate, raise your hand. You can also use Menti. We have a question over here and another over here.
Sí, yo quería hacer una pregunta y es específicamente porque estoy viendo una perspectiva sistémica de la calidad. Ahora, quería preguntar si el proceso de implementación de esta perspectiva sistémica puede ser tan escalonado como fue la iniciativa, que eventualmente, porque nosotros tenemos el conocimiento que hay una calidad técnica, hay una calidad percibida y probablemente una calidad sentida. ¿Este proceso de construcción podría ser escalonado o se recomienda hacerlo en conjunto, usuario del servicio de salud y prestador del servicio de salud? Esto lo pregunto porque ese proceso de implementación de la calidad eventualmente, personalmente digo yo, ¿será que empezamos primero por esa calidad técnica, hacer las cosas bien, independientemente que el usuario sienta que está siendo bien atendido, pero estamos haciendo las cosas correctas? ¿O ese constructo de perspectiva sistémica debería ir construido realmente con ambos actores desde el inicio y como para poder irlo haciendo a plazos y hacerlo operativamente bien?
Okay, so the question is if implementation processes can be done in phases, if you should start with technical quality, or if you should do everything together. Jafet, you seem to have an answer ready.
Not an answer, but the perspective. I think it's not an either or, it's a both and question. I do see them both as both and. I think it's important to see both the communities, the people as our end user, and also the providers as our end user. It's two sides of the same coin, and I think you can do both together, because when you focus on technical quality, we tend to think about technical experts as those who bring the subject matter expertise. In my mind, and I started off by saying I am a mother, I am a woman, and I think we also need to listen and sit down with people who have experience by experience, with people from the communities with whom we can co-design and co-create, so that we are really able to close that no-do gap. And I would be happy to share some examples from how we have done that together.
Go ahead.
Buenos días, soy Jorge Hermida, trabajo para el Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI, como director en América Latina. Y lo que voy a decir no se refiere a la iniciativa Mesoamerica, sino más en general. El tema es cómo pasar del mundo del proyecto al mundo del sistema, del mundo real. Y yo creo que ahí tenemos una dificultad tal vez conceptual o metodológica, porque muchas veces la manera como están diseñados e implementados en el mundo de los proyectos están orientados por los mismos donantes muchas veces, por los gobiernos muchas veces, para lograr resultados lo más rápido posible, los mejores resultados con el menor presupuesto. Entonces hay una presión muy grande en el mundo de los proyectos para tener resultados que mostrar lo más rápido posible de la mejor manera. Y luego lo que sucede, a veces sin querer y a veces sin darnos cuenta, es que se construyen mini sistemas en el mundo del proyecto que no son el sistema real. porque en el mini sistema del mundo del proyecto se crean condiciones que no están en el mundo de afuera del proyecto. Entonces hay inputs que no están afuera, ¿no es cierto? Hay recursos humanos que no están afuera, hay mecanismos de motivación que no están afuera, hay mecanismos de medición que no están afuera en el mundo de lo real. Y cuando se trata de llevar ese mundo ideal que se va construyendo en un proyecto al mundo de la realidad, nos topamos con una barrera muy grande, que es la barrera de lo real.
Gracias. Rashad,
Quería oír qué piensan ustedes sobre eso.
Rashad, la pregunta es, the question is, how can we move from projects to systems?
Yeah. Jorge, that's a fantastic comment. Thank you. Yes, and I do think that projectitis has its problem, and you've articulated these. We need to, even as a donor-driven project, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that, first of all, we're a guest in somebody's home. That's number one. And our objective is to exit, build that capacity, and exit as soon as possible. With that in mind, our primary objective becomes not so much achieve the results as quickly as possible yourself, but how do you enable others to be able to achieve these results and continue to achieve similar results in the future. I think if one operating a project goes in with that type of mindset, then the likelihood is they're using the funding they have, they're using the ability to bring in external expertise with the objective of developing the local capacity. That, I think, is a critical point, and that really differentiates a project-minded approach versus an institution-building approach, which then is taken over by the country and continued by the country. It doesn't mean your relationship changes, or it means the relationship changes, but it doesn't end. Pretty much all of the countries that we've worked in, we continue to have strong relationships with, but I think it's because of that mindset and because of the relationship that you build that then it can continue. But thank you, Jorge. That's a fantastic point you brought up.
Pedro, perhaps you can tell us was the initiative able to do this that Rashad is mentioning?
Yeah, I think I love your comment there, especially on having this approach of trying to enable others to do it, no? Like giving them the tools to do it. And I think that's how we need to start thinking from what we learned from the initiative, how can we do this same thing in other projects? And what type of tools do they actually need to do this? Not just like the result. I guess one of those, I mentioned it a bit earlier, one of those tools, and it's not minor, is these leadership abilities that can be taught, some coaching abilities, really how to give feedback. There's a science to that, and I think that's really important. And of course, all these skills related to the science of quality that are also really important. Like the analysis of data is super important, like how to measure something and how to actually get the insight that you need to decide what's the action that you need to take to improve. So yeah, I will just add that to what you're saying.
Thank you, Pedro. Let's take a question from Menthi.
Mike?
How would you work with the country to help them build people's trust in the system?
Who wants to take it?
I'm happy. I'm not sure I'm happy to take that, but I'm going to take that one. So I think this gets to the point I was making before about social capital. At the heart of social capital is trust. Trust. And trust is key to build those strong ties that I was referring to, that connection. And I think the key, and I saw the drawings earlier, right, has to do with listening, approaching with people and systems and ministries and users with curiosity instead of telling, asking, and asking what matters to them. There is a global movement about what matters to you, and I love that question because it's really powerful. It reframes the question from what's the matter to what matters to you. And it's really powerful as a starting point when you engage with governments, when you engage with clinicians, and also, and perhaps more importantly, when you engage with mothers, when you engage with community leaders. And I think that's the beginning of trust, that listening with empathy, which leads to compassion and collective action.
Rashad, do you want to add something?
I think you nailed it. Thank you.
Let's take another one.
It's a tough one.
The next one would be, what recommendations could you provide to help the highest tiers from Ministry of Health understand that quality has to be part of what they as ministers lead?
I think, can I take part of that one? I think Maureen Bisognano, one of the founders of IHI, tends to talk about the importance of being multilingual. And I think, I see ministry officials here. You have to deal with a lot of competing priorities every day, and resources are scarce. So I think being multilingual in terms of how you approach and how you frame the opportunities, and making sure that there is alignment with what ministries of health see as needs and urgent needs is key. I'm not saying that that's the only thing, but I think being multilingual and making the case for investing, not spending, investing in quality. Investing in quality which has long-term impacts, and making sure that quality becomes everybody's business. Quality becomes the strategy. It's not one more thing that you do and that the quality office is responsible for.
This is not answering the question, but it's building on what you said, because I think you said something important. Now, there was a day in my life when I was the head of improvement in my country, and I reported to the minister at the time, and I remember one thing that I asked the minister to do, which is, when it comes to reporting on quality, let me not be the person who asks for the reports. Why don't you ask for the reports? Because then it basically sent a trickle-down message. So in addition to that, having him be the person who says, report on the progress that you're doing, created a very different dynamic in the room. I think that's something I've carried wherever I've gone, that you're in charge, you need to be asking for it. Your methods person should be helping you achieve it, but the requirement should come from the top.
Pedro, you have a final comment?
Yes, so I would say that sometimes because of history, I said when you talk about quality with the ministry, sometimes they think about like quality assurance or control, and I think we probably need to start like a different conversation, and maybe a different term, because it's how do you move. What we're talking here about quality is talking more about like health system performance, no? Like what results are we gonna care about and achieve in terms of population health and responding to population need. And I think that's probably more the conversation. No? How do we change this health system to actually achieve those health needs and from the population? And we use these tools for that. Not necessarily just to make sure that everyone has a minimal set of standards, but so actually we are responding to what people are needing. And I think we start to have that conversation on more.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Rashad. Thank you, Jafet. This has been a very exciting and fun conversation. We talked about learning. We talked about changing the culture. We talked about changing the leadership, changing on what we focus, changing on how to sustain improvements. It has been really fun and exciting to be here with you today. And please come forward and talk to these wonderful people on the coffee break, because we'll have some time later to discuss.
Thank you.